On Business Incorporated today, we bring you updates and conversations and matters arising at the ongoing U.S.-Africa Summit in Washington, D.C. Ghana inflation surges above 50% for the month of November 2022. And Nigeria oil production is up for the second consecutive month by 1.8 million barrels a day. Good afternoon. Welcome to Business Incorporated here on Channels Television. I'm Indy John Mekop. Begin as usual with market numbers in Africa. Good to note that the NGX has recovered, and when we tracked it at intraday, it's positive. That's why you see it there behind me, 0.32% at intraday after closing in the negative yesterday, 49,000 above that at this time. South Africa is, however, in the red, deeply in the red, more than 2%. We go to Egypt, and it's more than 1% in the red. That's for Egypt at intraday, while Kenya closed yesterday at the same rate, but on the flip side, 1.2% for Tuesday. Now, for major markets in the Middle East that we track is mostly positive sentiments. In the United Arab Emirates there, no, let's start with Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi in the green, 0.07%. Saudi Arabia, 0.79%, also in the green. Qatar, I don't know if what the World Cup is doing to Qatari markets. It seems it has inverse relationship. Qatar has been in the red for some weeks now, almost 1% down at intraday. Abu Dhabi 0.07% in the green. Dubai also in the green, 0.32%. Now let's go to Europe, and what we'll begin in Europe by talking about energy ministers. We know that energy prices have been top on the agenda of a lot of conversation right there, and we see that they kicked the can down the road again. An 8-hour emergency meeting in Brussels. So officials failed to agree on the definition of a price cap on gas. Another controversy there. Well, today we have Janelle joining us now to give us details and the background to this. Hi, Janelle. Good afternoon. So what happened at this 8-hour emergency meeting?
Well, the gas energy price cap has been a stumbling block for Europe's energy ministers for several weeks now. And by the looks of it, that is going to remain the case at least for another week more. What we're seeing are 27 EU countries unable to agree to a gas price cap that was meant to protect consumers in the bloc from the wildly swinging energy costs triggered by Russia's war on Ukraine. But the key sticking point here is how high that price cap should be. Now, this isn't the first time I'm talking to you about this. Around 3 weeks back, I told you about the European Commission's proposal of a price ceiling if natural gas exists 275 euros, or that's $290 per megawatt hour for 2 weeks, and if it is 58 euros higher than the price of liquefied natural gas on world markets. Now, that sounds complicated, but not only that, it was widely derided as being completely tokenistic. And as a ceiling, it was much too high to have any effect. Gas, for example, is now trading at 140 euros and 55 cents per megawatt hour. Fast forward to today, and the EU energy ministers still cannot agree. The next time they will meet on this will be December 19, that's next week. Meanwhile, temperatures are only dropping here in Europe, and soaring heating costs are a reality already facing EU residents, and there's simply plenty of room for the situation to get worse.
Of room and energy temperatures dropping there, Janelle. But what else is at stake here?
Well, at the very core of it, since this is a measure meant to insulate consumers from the worst effects of the energy crisis, and that, to make sure they're able to keep the lights on and also be able to pay for it, Consumer energy prices in the EU rose by nearly 35% in November compared with last year, according to the EU statistics agency Eurostat. And what we're seeing now is a sort of lack of consensus among EU countries that keep them from achieving that goal of protecting consumers. So this is a solidarity issue, but also a credibility issue. The EU has to be able to show it can pull together in the face of complex problems, the way it has been able to do so in terms of, say, agreeing on sanctions on Russia in several rounds at that. But the divide here is stubborn. The majority, including Greece, Spain, Belgium, Poland, they want a price cap. But the countries like Germany and the Netherlands are worried that the natural gas will simply go to markets that are willing to pay more money. But many are watching to see what France might do, because first it backed a price cap, but last week expressed concern over possible effects on financial markets. That's according to Reuters.
So talking about financial markets, what else is happening around there?
Well, the gas energy price cap has been a stumbling block for Europe's energy ministers for several weeks now. And by the looks of it, that is going to remain the case at least for another week more. What we're seeing are 27 EU countries unable to agree to a gas price cap that was meant to protect consumers in the bloc from the wildly swinging energy costs triggered by Russia's war on Ukraine. But the key sticking point here is how high that price cap should be. Now, this isn't the first time I'm talking to you about this. Around 3 weeks back, I told you about the European Commission's proposal of a price ceiling if natural gas exists 275 euros, or that's $290 per megawatt hour for 2 weeks, and if it is 58 euros higher than the price of liquefied natural gas on world markets. Now, that sounds complicated, but not only that, it was widely derided as being completely tokenistic. And as a ceiling, it was much too high to have any effect. Gas, for example, is now trading at 140 euros and 55 cents per megawatt hour. Fast forward to today, and the EU energy ministers still cannot agree. The next time they will meet on this will be December 19, that's next week. Meanwhile, temperatures are only dropping here in Europe, and soaring heating costs are a reality already facing EU residents, and there's simply plenty of room for the situation to get worse.
All right, Janelle, thank you so much for that update. We know this issue of the gas price cap is going to be on for a while. I mean, putting even the oil cap at $60 is still generating a lot of reactions. But let's move over to the UK now, where Juliana is standing by. Juliana, good afternoon. Well, you started this conversation with Laddie in the morning, talking about the migrant channel crisis. Any update and spillover effect?
Good afternoon, Innie. Well, we are expecting an update from the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, to lawmakers imminently. Prime Minister's questions is currently ongoing. Rishi Sunak taking cross-party questions from the Labour opposition party as well as the Liberal Democrats. Clearly, the issue that engulfed the Channel last night, overnight, has dominated some discussions. What we believe now so far is that 4 people may have died, and this is through a capsizing of a small dinghy. And we were just talking about this literally 24 hours ago, Innie, because yesterday Prime Minister Rishi Sunak outlined his plans to tackle immigration to the country. And for anybody who lives in this country, you know that immigration is a really sore topic, particularly illegal migration, which is these small boats and lorries that come across over the Channel. It's kind of reminiscent to what we had pretty much this time last year, where there were 27 fatalities of people trying to cross over. And it is exceptionally cold. When I was speaking to Laddie this morning, Innie, it was -3 degrees. So you can imagine what it was like at 3 o'clock in the morning when that distress call was first pointed out to people who were trying to help them in the sea. It was probably about -10, icy black, really difficult decisions. And now this is going to be a very difficult decision for the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary. He has to appease the country. He has to appease back backbench Tory MPs who, quite frankly, want migration numbers to go down. If you go back to 2018, we had about 8,000 people crossing the English Channel. Fast forward to 2022, so far this year, we have had over 44,000. No matter what precautions or measures, including that flight to Rwanda that the government put in place, it is not stopping people from getting here. And if you're not from Syria, if you're not from Afghanistan, if you're not from a war-torn country, then there doesn't appear to be any right to get to the UK if you are an asylum seeker. So it's a significant issue. 4 people known to have died so far. I believe 43 people were pulled out of the water alive. About 30 of them were pulled out of the water. So they are very lucky to have their lives. But this is an ongoing issue, and there will be an update imminently from the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman.
Yeah, Juliana, I mean, as you noted, it started as just a normal conversation when we had this about 24 hours ago on Business Incorporated, and now this is bringing it to the fore. But let's turn our attention to the markets now and see what are the numbers looking like there.
Markets aren't great. There was some data this morning. There is a week full of data, including the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee gathering tomorrow. We're expecting a 0.5% hike in interest rates to 3.5%. But the data we got today was for inflation. That is the biggest economic headache for Rishi Sunak at the moment. It dipped slightly from 11.1% in October to 10.7% in November. That's not enough to bring down the cost of living, unfortunately. So anybody who's shopping in the UK will see that prices are up 16.5% on the year. That is huge, especially as we're coming to the festive period. Most people want to eat more than they would usually eat at any other time of the year, but it's going to cost them a lot more. This has been reflected in the figures at intraday. And also as well, we got some data showing that insolvencies for small to medium-sized businesses in the UK are up 21% year on year. And again, that's all down to the cost of living, high energy bills. They just cannot keep the lights on. So to have a look at the numbers, the FTSE All Share is down at intraday by 0.36%. The FTSE 100 down by that same amount, and the FTSE 250, the domestic market, is down by 0.46%. There has been a rally of the British pound to the US dollar. I believe one British pound will buy you about $1.24 at the moment. That's a 6 months high. So it's trading up against the dollar by 0.25%, though the British pound is trading down against the euro by 0.02%, and it's also trading down against the Japanese yen by 0.29% at intraday, Annie.
All right, Juliana, thank you so much for those market numbers, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
See you then.
So from the UK, we cross over to the United States, and we know that Africans' eyes are on the United States at this time, specifically at the Washington, D.C., where we have the U.S.-Africa Summit, and thank God we have our eyes there. We have Maria Bird joining us from there, and so that's the meeting started yesterday, and top officials, top U.S. trade officials, and their counterparts in Africa have agreed that the American law giving about 36 nations duty-free access to the world's biggest economy for almost 7,000 products needs updating. That's one of the agenda for that meeting, and stronger implementation. The moves on the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which expires in 2025, are needed to translate opportunity to concrete benefits for the African people. Now let's speak to Maria Bird, our correspondent in Washington, now to give us the background, some other conversations going on there. Hi, Maria. Good morning to you from Washington. Good afternoon from Nigeria.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah. So what else are they talking about over there at the U.S.-Africa Summit?
Well, what we know is that this was the largest international summit. So not only the largest U.S.-Africa summit, the largest international summit we've had here in the United States since COVID. So that says a lot about the importance of this summit. This summit is one that I think President Biden is very hopeful will reestablish the relationship between U.S. and Africa, especially as it relates to trade. Now, obviously, there have been conversations around this was really spearheaded behind the U.S.'s strong leadership role in the war against Russia's war against Ukraine, and being a strong supporter of Ukraine and noting that some African nations have not stood in alignment and allies with the U.S. in this. But we also know that as a result of what that might have been some of the challenge that the U.S. was having, there is a standing meeting today that is going to incorporate over 300 companies from the U.S. and Africa CEOs. We also know that 49 heads of state from Africa accepted the invitation to come to the U.S. Africa Summit. And we also know that the White House has been fully committed. We've seen President Biden host events. We've seen Vice President Kamala Harris. We've seen Secretary of State Blinken at almost each and every summit and every single meeting that has been held since yesterday. And so this, I think, is a pivotal time. I think that we are seeing something that we've never seen before between U.S. and Africa relations, and specifically what that's going to mean for trade. Now, at the end of this meeting, we will really know what's come out of that. We talk about 300 CEOs of companies from the U.S. and Africa. There is going to be likely some sort of big announcement as it relates to trade and investment that will come out of that.
Yeah, well, we do hope to get that. But, Maria, over here, there's this notion that this summit, one of the motivation behind this summit is actually, the ongoing divide. Where will Africa lean to? We know that in the next couple of years, I think 2035, Africa would have hit its sweet spots. It will have the highest population, the highest market. We're talking about working population, and all of that. And that's one of the reasons why we see the Western world trying to get a share of Africa before it hits that peak. Is Africa going to go the way of China, Russia, or going to go the way of US and Europe? What are you hearing about this?
We all know that China is one of the largest competitors for the US. We also know that the US is trying to reestablish itself as being one of the superpowers, if not the superpower within the world. And China has definitely given the U.S. a challenge in that area. The U.S. is trying to really reestablish itself in the tech space, which China has taken up quite vastly. And so if the U.S. is able to align itself more strategically, I think more effectively, but most importantly, understanding that Africa is a partner and understanding that the U.S. is actually going to benefit quite greatly with expanding the partnership, I think the U.S. Will be able to see growth, not only with the U.S.-Africa relationship, but globally. And so I think that the U.S. is, to your point, I think that is an underpinning of this meeting. I think that anyone that does not recognize that is not looking at the reality of what you just stated, which is expected by 2035. And so we are in a position, I think, in the U.S. that we're challenged with the economy, we're challenged with resources, and so being able to partner in a larger way, I think, is going to, in many ways, benefit the U.S. Obviously, there have been long-standing relationships between the U.S. and Africa. There have been lots of work that has been done, but I think that as it relates to investment and trade, the U.S. has to get serious. I think this is their time to get serious about how to build better business partnerships and investment partnerships moving forward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maria. And I believe Africa too has to get serious and choose its path, intentionally. Thank you so much for getting up early and joining on the show, Maria. So let's take a break now. When we come back, Ghana has its inflation hitting 50.3%. What does it mean to the man on the street? We'll have that conversation afterwards. This is Business Incorporated on Channels Television. Welcome back to watching Business Incorporated here in Channels Television. Well, Ghana's annual consumer inflation accelerated to a new 21-year high of 50.3%. That's for November. And that's up 40.4% in the previous month, driven by utilities, food, and fuel data. And then the spike comes a day after Ghana secured a staff-level agreement with the International Monetary Fund for a $3 billion three-year support package. Ghana approached the IMF in July to ask for financial help after soaring prices and economic hardship spurred street protests. Well, we're supposed to stay on that issue for a bit and speak to Professor John Gatley. Haven't been able to get him, but this is a topic I will certainly stay on for a couple of days. What does inflation of over 50% look like? We'll speak to some Ghanaians later on to get a full picture of that. And moving on now, in Nigeria, it's a bit of good news for a change. Nigeria's oil production increased month on month to 1.186 million barrels a day in November 2022, and that's up about 17% from 1.014 million barrels a day in October. This is according to the monthly oil market report of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, that's OPEC. Well, this is the second consecutive month-on-month rise in October in output following the resolve by the federal government and oil companies to confront the myriad of issues that had undermined official output figures, which included thefts, illegal refining, and vandalism. In October 2022, the OPEC reported 0.014 million barrels per day output for Nigeria, a significant rise from September that was less than a million. With a positive turn in the sector, Nigeria appears set to meet its 1.8 million barrels per day quota given by OPEC. Zimbabwe and Botswana have joined forces to deal with cross-border stock theft. Zimbabwe government believes that stopping cross-border livestock rustling between the two countries was an urgent matter. The resolution of the boundary issue between the two countries and the establishment of the Joint Ministerial Committee on Combating Cross-Border Livestock Rustling are some of the urgent areas that they believe need concerted efforts. Botswana's Foreign Affairs Minister Secretary said that both countries were working hard to combat the devastating effects of livestock rustling, as well as conducting joint operations to eradicate the foot and mouth disease. Trade exchange between Egypt and the United States reached $7.3 billion during the first 9 months of the year, and that's up $6.5 billion during the same period a year earlier, recording an increase of over 13%. The reports also show that total Egyptian exports to the United States has reached $1.8 billion during the first 9 months of the year, compared to $1.9 billion during the same period last year. Meanwhile, the Egyptian import from the United States amounted $5.5 billion during the first 9 months of this year, compared to $4.6 billion during the same period last year. This shows an increase of 19.5%. That's the program for today, the midweek edition of Business Incorporated. We do have 2 more to go for the week, so join me again tomorrow at 1:30. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm Ini John Mekwa.